Hello and welcome to what is a sunny Darlington today. My name is Martin Webster and I'm the Workforce Development Manager for Children's and Adult Services, People Services. And I'm joined again today by Kelly Rose from the Public Health Team, and we're going to be talking about making fruit and vegetables the norm. So I'm going to hand over to Kelly, start the presentation, and I'll be asking questions part way through. Over to you, Kelly.
Hi everyone. Yes, it's me again. We're talking about fruit and vegetables today, just because it tends to be the thing that's sort of a sticking point with children, young people. So one of parts of my research is teenagers, and obviously teenagers, well, not obviously, but they do in the UK pretty much have the poorest diet of most populations. And in the past, they were, I suppose, the strongest population age group, but now there's real concerns over their, the maternal health, the future maternal health, and all those different things. And they're missing out on certain nutrients that really impact longer term health. So only half of adolescents around about eat fruit and vegetables every day in the UK. I've sat in a classroom where you've pretty much got a minority, maybe one or two out of 20 something young people, teenagers, that actually have 4 or 5 of the 5 a day. So it's sort of the norm not to have enough fruit and vegetables, but I think that we generally don't realise how important it is on a daily basis to try and get those minimum of a 5 a day, and try and get it in sort of them embedded habits, if you like. So they're really important because you're more likely to have a reduced risk of heart disease, which in the northeast, many people die of heart disease under the age of 75, which shouldn't be happening, more than sort of the England average. Stroke, early death. There is evidence suggesting that that high intakes of fruit and vegetables may reduce risk of some cancers, depression, type 2 diabetes, and of course weight gain as well. So a high fruit and vegetable varieties are linked to those micronutrients, those vitamins, minerals that we need to help easy recovery from illness, strengthening the immunity. More important than ever with the COVID-19, I think most of us are realising that great health is really important. The earlier we start this, the better as well. But there are things you can do as a family.
So just before we go on to the next slide, Kelly, how do we kind of make sure that we promote this with families as well? Because as you say, great health is really important. And I think the promotion of that and the communication of that is massively important with families as well. How do we go about doing that a little bit more actively in Darlington and I guess in the country as well?
Yeah, I think we've really got to think about making the healthy choice the easy choice. But I think starting early years, so the healthy early years projects that we're working on are really looking at how we can introduce children, toddlers to fruit and vegetables, even images of them. So it sounds strange, but seeing images of fruit and vegetables and how they're grown at a young age actually improves the acceptability of fruit and vegetables as children. Who may be more fussier are more likely to eat them. But having something in sort of that early years settings, more fruit and vegetables, thinking about it sort of from the weaning stages, having more fruit and vegetables, having consistent messages across the towns, obviously town centre, Cornmill we're working with, sharing those Change for Life messages. Go on Change for Life. There's lots of messaging. There's lots of healthy snack swaps. They've got a brilliant cooking together program where parents can sign up and they get sent recipes and videos and shopping tips and shopping lists to help cook on a budget as well, and use things that are sort of frozen and tinned fruit and vegetables as well can be used towards one of the 5 a day. It's really, I think, about sort of that embedding the habits. Once you realise sort of the importance and embedding the habits, because I know we were chatting before, weren't we, Martin, about sort of having that headspace as a busy parent, and just all the stress that's sort of paying bills, and sort of access to fruit and vegetables sometimes isn't as easy for some people than it is others. So I think having some real easy, simple tips, which we'll go through as we go along, but having consistent messages across town where we can, that eating fruit and vegetables and having it around us and being able to access it from our food businesses and get fruit and vegetables, fruit and veg everywhere, basically. Let's just have fruit and veg everywhere.
And it's that consistency, isn't it, really? And I think that when you mention about kind of frozen fruit and vegetable, tin fruit and vegetables, it's about having that ease of access and that opportunity for people to recognise that they can just incorporate it into every single meal, really.
Yeah, I remember sort of when my kids were smaller and I went to study and we were in sort of less of a good financial place, as it were. And I remember sort of we would have like tinned fruit each night, and it was sort of like a habit we were in after dinner. And things like doing sort of omelettes with frozen vegetables in it, different dishes like that
Yeah.
where you've got your protein but you've got your fruit and veg in it. And always being a favourite sort of wholemeal pasta, and then doing like a tomato sauce, and then you can put different proteins in it. But you almost need these go-to easy things, wholemeal wraps, and where the kids can make their own little pizzas on the top and things like that.
That's really interesting in terms of what encourages people to eat fruit and vegetables, isn't it, really? And the things on the slide that we've got on at the moment around that varied colours and all of the different things and the frequency, like you say, about making sure that it's part of every meal. It just adds so much in terms of how
Yeah.
someone feels fuller, how someone gets those nutrients, how that impacts on from a child right the way through to kind of adolescent and older, their brain development, all of those kind of things are really key.
Yeah, eating a rainbow is really important because it's so easy sometimes. I think it's sort of the British way a little bit as well. It's like you're meeting two veg, so it's like, oh, well, I have my peas and carrots every day. But the variety is something that we don't talk about enough because it's got to be a whole range. You can get your frozen berries and make your smoothies, which is nice and easy. I tend to put sort of blueberries or mixed berries in with a bit of peanut butter, and you've got sort of a bit of milk or yogurt, whatever, is whiz it up if you've got a smoothie maker and you've got like a really healthy sort of dessert, especially if it's frozen, because it's like a frozen dessert. But using different ways like that to get them in, but things where they're high in fibre does keep you fuller for longer, and is that healthier microbiome, which we'll go through in our food and mood session and let everybody know about the importance of sort of feeding the gut bacteria, which we'll go through in another session. But fruit and vegetables are so important for that. And if you, I suppose, get in the habit of adding sort of one for breakfast, one in your lunch, two or three in your dinner, and sort of one for snack, that's how you sort of get them in your day, I suppose, as well.
So you mentioned habits there as well, Kelly. So what kind of things can families do in terms of making things a habit?
Yeah, so I mean, it's start with where you're at, isn't it? So we're working with obviously foster services and families and thinking about where you're at as a family. If you sort of find mornings are absolutely crazy mental, and you sort of you sort of feeling like, oh gosh, we're not even getting breakfast every day, we're not even having, it's just we haven't got this routine right, how we're going to sort this. And I think sometimes having like these easy breakfasts, I know a couple of sort of families I've worked with in the past have made sort of these overnight oats, where you get your oats, you put your yogurt or your milk in or whatever, and you put your berries in and maybe a little bit of maple syrup or a little bit of honey or whatever, and you put it in the fridge overnight, and you've got sort of 2 or 3 mornings of breakfast for the whole family, and you could dish the portion out, so you can sort of have these habits to make sure life is easier, having these pre-prepared. But I think as well, eating together and sort of the kids knowing that that's going to happen and you're going to eat together, habits in terms of, I suppose I've never sort of done it like this, but lots of people sort of do, where, oh, this is what we have on a Monday, this is what we have on a Tuesday, this is what we have on a Wednesday. That can be really, really helpful. But I tend to batch cook on a weekend, like Sundays, like a batch cook, and I'll make like a curry or a soup or some different things that will go together, chop some veggies and either put them in the freezer or the fridge, so they'll all ready, so it makes it easier when you're really, really busy. So these are all things that can be habits that can be embedded, but it does take a little bit of thought sometimes to begin with, and it's not about beating yourself up as well, because life can be crazy. It's about thinking, where can I start, and how can I start just the easiest place? And it might be that it is breakfast, because if you get a breakfast in your child, they're going to perform better at school. They're going to feel better, and yeah, get the new stuff in there.
I guess from that point as well, where it says on that final bullet point around physically active children and young people being more likely to eat fruit and vegetables, I suppose that kind of in today's society there's lots of children and young people that are part of kind of sports clubs, or that are engaging in lots of physical activity. They've got loads of physical activity that they'll be doing at school. So is it easier to engage children and young people in fruit and vegetables, have you found, when they are more physically active?
Yeah, I think, well, these are sort of things that the research has shown where kids are more likely to eat more fruit and vegetables. And I think sometimes that is around the feeling of it's important to perform well. Like you say, if they're part of clubs, they'll be sort of taught that, to perform better, eating better. But I think as well, they sort of they're more interested in maybe being healthy, possibly. I mean, this is not always, of course, but usually if schools have a whole school approach where they are fitting in moving more and eating well together, those are interventions that have been proven by research to work really well, where they've got the moving and the nourishing together.
Yeah, and that's a really positive message, and I guess that comes to kind of skincare and healthcare and all of that kind of thing as well. So, in terms of how many portions have people eaten today, what do we mean by that? How many people? Everyone says about 5 a day, and what does that 5 a day look like, and what could it look like?
Yeah, so it's a minimum of a 5 a day. That sort of, it's remembering that it's that minimum. So it's quite easy when you think about a piece of fruit or vegetable. It's like one of your 5 a day. If you're thinking about a smoothie, for example, generally you would probably class that as one of your 5 a day, even if you have a few in, and it's because of the way it's sort of blended. And the sugar's broken down. Obviously, half a tin of baked beans is one of your 5 a day. Usually using sort of handfuls. You've got like the 3 teaspoons of peas there to show you. But the best place to look for what is one of your 5 a day list is your Change for Life or British Nutrition Foundation. And of course, every year they have a National Healthy Eating Week, so you can look up what they're doing, and they have a lot of healthy eating messages, and they use the hands for portion sizes. So you tend to think, if you look at a child's fist and an adult's fist, you're thinking about your brown rice, your wholemeal pasta, and things like that. If you think about it in terms of a fist, it's different from an adult to a child, and we tend to not always think about the portion sizes as appropriate. If you think about a deck of cards or sort of a palm for your protein, because we often think we need more protein than we actually do. So, but if we eat some protein and starchy carbohydrates and sort of some good fats and fibre at every meal, then we will stay fuller for longer as well, and not necessarily have those sugar spikes that impacts mood, behaviour, and all those types of things as well.
So you mentioned as well a little bit about kind of ownership and children and young people having a choice, and them being involved in decisions around food and things. And we mentioned that in previous kind of videos too. Why is that important, and how can parents and schools, etc., really push that message?
Yeah, so children and young people, obviously it changes through the teenage years, because you've got like the brain changes happening and the development, and that strong moving away from parents and being part of their tribe. But even children, like, they value choice so much. So when they're part of that process and they feel independent, they feel part of the process, they're more likely to want to eat what you're eating. So it's really important that if you're either carrying out a food intervention in a school or a healthy early year setting, or you're in the home and you're planning the week's food, if you're involving the children and sort of saying, oh, we want to sort of feel good and nourished, and we've got to perform well this week, we've got a busy week, what we're going to have. And I think thinking about snack swaps is quite important as well, because what's because you sort of want to keep them full and they may be going to football or whatever, and a lot of parents tend to have buy the breakfast bars, and they're really usually quite high in sugar. So I think knowing some different snacks you can have instead of those, and like for example breakfast, like your Weetabix just with a banana, or just nice and easy, some cashew nuts with a piece of fruit or something like that. But some tips on here that I've got to increase is like when you're making things like a spag bol or a curry or a chili or a stir fry soup. When I was teaching in a school, I had this sort of a plan that by year 9, so year 7, 8, and 9 in Key Stage 3, that all the children could make a curry, chili, stir fry, a soup, and a tomato-based sauce. Because if you can make all of those, you can add in whatever vegetables you've got in, and that's what I tend to do. I just try and sort of rotate different veggies each week, and then make very similar meals. But obviously, your stir fry is different because you've got different veggies, and it's about flavouring them and things like that as well. But having these 4 to 5 easy go-to cook dishes is what I was sort of talking about before, really. Sort of people tend to come to me and say, oh, I need more recipes, but generally it can cause overwhelm when you have too many recipes. So not having as many, think veggies first. But anything that's naturally grown and it's not it's not a processed food, is more likely going to be a better snack swap. And like I said, I've got a link on there as well for the Change for Life, and they've got lots of different 100-calorie snacks.
Fantastic. And again, I think we talked about some of this already, but those positive associations with fruit and vegetables, including children in that experience, taking children with you shopping, or getting them to choose when you're doing your online shop what vegetables and what kind of fruits and things that they want. That's massively important, isn't it?
Yeah, involving them in everything. It's really about that healthy relationship to food, because I think that we've lived in this culture for so long, this diet culture, this restrictive mindset, that it's about like actually increasing the good food, sort of thinking about replacing the things that maybe are not so good for us. So really trying to tip it on its head, really, how we've always thought restrictively. And I think helping kids have fun, doing the fruit faces on the plates, getting like the little chocolate dips with the fruit and things like that. I know for sort of my kids are older, so I didn't necessarily know some of this stuff, but super powered fruit and veggies works so well. I remember telling my niece, I took her some, I'm like the most uncool auntie ever. Took her some I think it's either sugar snap peas or something like that, and I was like, oh, if you eat these, you make I've actually written it on there, I didn't realize, makes you run faster. And she was like, my mum was like, oh, this is great because she wants to run faster than this girl at nursery. You've said the right thing. But it is in the evidence to show that actually if you talk about them in the superpower way, and actually some of this is evidence-based. So Betsy Blueberry helps you remember things, and carrots give you this supervision because it does help your eyesight. So the vitamin A, beta carotene, so you can sort of try and link things in. But I know what's around now is the See and Eat. If you go to seeandeat.org.uk, they've got like a library of books, and they're literally just a picture of broccoli. And we were talking with one of our early years settings in Darlington the other day, and they'd actually shown the young children these things, and you look at it, you think, oh, it's just a piece of broccoli and it shows where it's grown. But she said they were absolutely fascinated with it. So it actually is surprising how open younger children are to just looking at the images, and in terms of like nudges and using fruit and vegetables on menus and trays, which we've got in our Healthy Families menus that we've got in a couple of our restaurants so far, and hopefully that's going to widen, is where young people just see these fruit and vegetables and they can colour them in and they can have activities and things like that. Yeah, exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely see the superpowered food stuff. I know my 6-year-old, I told him that broccoli will make him faster, and he loves broccoli. It's his favorite food now because he wants to be faster. So
One of
that
the
kind of thing
foods.
is just a brilliant little kind of technique. Um, just as we talked about kind of younger children there, I was very when I read the presentation initially, and I read this slide, I thought, oh, controversial. So so as children and young people do get older, you've wrote down there it's not cool to be healthy. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's been fascinating to me as a teacher in a secondary school and going towards studying the sort of social side to a teenager's views on being healthy and obviously talking to kids and using the word healthy is just totally switches young people off. If you say, oh, eat that because it's healthy, they've got those negative associations. Obviously, they're to them like cake. It's the same as, well, us really, isn't it? We're brought up to think, you know, the rewards of being cake and chocolate and what have you. And then you know, if it's healthy, then it can't taste nice. So again, it's like tipping it on the head, but it's sort of going in with the view that that's how they think. And there are ways around it, and there's definitely, you know, over a number of 8 years of working with kids, I saw it again and again and again. Oh, miss, I'm not going to eat that. I only eat burgers. They make it, they sit there and enjoy it, and they're like, oh, I'm going to make this at home, and they come in with stories of making it home. So but it is really important that, again, if you're sort of thinking about developing healthy interventions, again, I'm sort of, I suppose, thinking of a school, but it could be anywhere, clubs or anything, and thinking about it in the home. It can be emotionally risky to be seen to be interested in healthy eating for teenagers. Now, this particular study that I'm talking about here, it's dead, it was, but I think it's 2011 it's from, and it was in the northeast of England, and it was about how young people perceived their views on eating healthy and how they were influenced in their food choice. And it's really massively connected to your self-identity, what you eat and how you eat. You know, that's the vegan, that's the, you know, and I only eat fast food, and that's important. You know, that's really brilliant or cool or whatever it is now. But as a means of judging others as well. So judging others by the way that they eat. I remember years ago, my eldest going into primary school with a hummus wrap, and she just wouldn't eat it anymore. She said somebody had told her it was smelly and she wouldn't eat it anymore, and that went on for about another year. So it's really important that they have that acceptance from their peers and their friendships. When I've done focus groups before, it's been very much around kids are more likely to choose what's familiar to them. So that sort of goes back to what we were saying about healthy early years. The more familiar they are with certain foods, the more likely they are to try different things as they get older. They're more likely to eat what their friends will eat. And they want to see some choice as well. So they want choice, they want to be involved, and they want convenience. So when we're thinking about secondary school food, things that are in a pot that are convenient for them, it can be a healthy curry, it could be a wholemeal pasta with different fillings, so they've got the choice. It could be a wholemeal pita pocket with some different types of fillings. This could be home or school, but different ways of appealing to the young person, because they are actually, when you dig down, they are actually interested in being healthy, but they're not interested in whether they're going to have heart disease or anything like that. They're interested in having healthy, glowing skin, you know, healthy hair, and healthy, strong nails, and they want to feel good. They want to perform well. They might want to concentrate. If they're sporty, they'll want to, you know, do well in their sport or whatever it is. So it's about that sort of immediate effect that food can have on it and help them feel good as well.
Do you think that kind of those kind of issues are changing as society moves on and things like that as well, Kelly? I know that you mentioned before in different countries there may be a different view towards food.
Yeah, I mean, the more westernized, the more sort of there's fast food around. You've got the heavy marketing. I mean, that's our biggest challenge and barrier as parents, really, because their branding, they're so sophisticated, they're so good at the nudges towards the more unhealthy eating, and it's cheap, it's convenient. Everything I've talked about, they're masters at it. And you know, it's nothing personal, it's just business and things like that. But that's the biggest thing. I mean, when we're thinking about taste preferences, it's important to look at other countries. And I use this a lot when I was talking to teenagers, because they would go, that's disgusting, you know, if they saw something. And I would sort of try and preempt that and say, try and not have a view first until you tried it. And also let your friend next to you try it before you go, that's horrible, because they're going to have that same view. So we talk a lot about those types of things, and then show them lunches from other countries. But it is learned. A lot of our taste preferences are learned. We naturally have a preference for sweetness, and innate sort of, you know, from those Neanderthal caveman days, and we're more likely to gorge on sweet things, and not like so many bitter tastes, which is why vegetables are not as popular at first. But actually, those funny faces that toddlers make when you're sort of giving them these foods doesn't mean they don't like it. It's just like keeping that exposure and getting them used to it, really, as well. I've gone right the way over the life course here, but yeah.
No, that's really interesting. So, the next slide is, again, it says the problem with the word healthy. So again, contentious. So what is the problem with the word healthy when it comes to children and young people?
I thought I'd add this in just because it was quite an interesting study, and it made me laugh because I did a similar thing when I was in school. We were trying to look at these school approved drinks. But this was 9 to 11 years old, and the ones that were told, this half the group were told that it was just a new drink to try, and then asked them what they thought of it. And the other half of the group were told it was a new health drink. And the word health obviously just made a huge difference.
Oh,
And
that's
that meant
interesting.
they were less likely to ask the parents to buy it, and or even tell the friends that they would like it, because it had the word healthy. And so it just really shows you. I mean, I remember showing them these cans of that were school approved, but we ended up not really going for them in the end. But we sort of were asking, I was asking the young people what they would think of them. They were like, oh yeah, definitely buy them, it's great, it's great. And I was like, you know, making a joke out of it, but I said literally it could have urine in it. Like, you don't know what's in this can, but the packaging was so important to them that it was just, you know, we had a bit of a laugh about it, but it just shows you how that marketing is significant for young people. Anybody that's interested in this part of what we've spoken about, please look up Bite Back 2030. There's a brilliant video you can show teenagers, and it shows you how their sort of subliminal messages. That's why we need the consistent healthy messages across town, because the subliminal messages around unhealthy food are very strong and vast and all over.
It's interesting, isn't it, how kind of things change throughout a person's lifetime, really, in terms of the healthy option when you're younger not being the cool option, and the healthy option now, the mass of kind of organizations and companies that are making billions of pounds worldwide because of healthy options. It's a huge,
Yeah.
huge industry now. And I think that if we could spend more time and more focus on those healthy kind of messages in terms of the way things are communicated, the way that things are advertised, it just makes such a difference to children and young people as well. And I think that's kind
Absolutely.
of part of the direction of travel that the organisations and the government, etc., are trying to kind of do now, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the problem is what you've just said is the main problem there is it's very expensive. So
Mm.
it's widening the gap of inequalities, because you're going to have the more affluent, you know, having more money means you've got access to healthier food, you've got access to, you know, maybe better education around food, you've got less financial stresses, so you're sort of more open to maybe embedding these things. And also that sort of equates to longer life. So you've got this widening gap, and we know from the Marmot review more recently that from 2010 to now, the gap of inequalities is widened. Our children are less healthier. We've got higher obesity levels in more deprived areas where there's financial issues, food insecurity. So for me, it's about making all children have access to healthy food, like all children, not this gap where you've got these expensive health foods and expensive, you know, healthy smoothies or whatever that you can get hold of. Actually, how can we make it cost, you know, cost less and which I know it's possible, and actually appeal to young people as well. And like you say, have that advertising in a good way as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I suppose that comes in again to the establishing those healthy habits and healthy routine as well. I know we've touched on this already, but can you talk us through a few more examples of why a healthy routine is really essential?
Yeah, it's really going back to the safety of a young person, where they feel like they've got routine and structures. It really gives them that Maslow's hierarchy importance of feeling safe, which means they sort of can value themselves, and they're more likely to sort of eat healthier and be physically active and things like that. Especially if you're thinking about children with autism or sensory challenges, it's really important for them to have, a time of eating, a place where they eat, very not strict as such, but like these really strong routines and these strong habits that help them be able to have a healthy relationship to food, and sort of establishing that routine. There's research that I looked at a while back when I was working a lot with foster parents and children, young people who have been in a really not great environment, a really unstable environment, maybe violent, stressful, things like that. When they are actually in a home environment or with a family that has really good established routines, then even though they might sort of push against them and there's issues with it, they're more likely when they become an adult to replicate those routines that they've had in that place where they felt safest. So we really don't always think about that being tied to healthy relationships to food, but it's very much related to eating together. That social side of it is so important as well, around this, and having these behaviour change strategies that nudge in. So we talked about this with the breakfast, and having a focus and just starting where you are as a family or as a place setting where you can actually encourage just small things to change.
That's a great point. Thanks, Kelly. And I know that we've talked and we'll talk in the future as well around nutrition and food being essential in every single aspect of children's services and adult services as well, and how we can help point people in the right direction of healthy choices too. So on that side,
Yeah, so I think as well, yeah, it's so important. Each place I've gone to and teams I've worked with and plans has been all around, being role models, getting health champions in your school, getting, thinking about there's cognitive dissonance sometimes in what we say and what we do. So, things like maybe not having fizzy pop, sugar sweetened beverages in the house as a norm. It might be just a weekend thing that you have, like more of a treat, but not necessarily have, that could be just one nudge you could make in your home. That sort of whole family approach, that whole school approach, that whole setting approach, that whole environment approach, where we're actually as adults providing opportunities, showing that it's fun to consume healthful food and drink where possible. And like I've said before, it's not about perfection, it's about progression. It's about what we do most of the time that counts, and using that sort of language. It's what we do most of the time that counts. It's not about having treats and things like that. Yeah, gosh, enjoy them, but think about how you sort of tip that balance over so you're having more of the healthier options.
and some of the things like you mentioned before are things that we can do in our own homes with children and young people, the default settings.
Yeah, I love that. I love anything to do with default settings, because I think the more, there's lots of things I haven't done right when my children were young, and I've studied a lot more nutrition since they were young. But I've always had wholemeal options, so whenever they've tasted, I remember sort of my eldest daughter going to a friend's for tea, and she was like, "Oh, I didn't, that." She told my friend that she didn't like the pasta, and my friend was like, "That's so strange. How could she not like the pasta?" And she just had never had white pasta before. So, I'm definitely haven't done things perfect, so please don't think that. But for wholemeal options, it's quite a good way, an easy nudge to get more fibre in the diet, to be feeding that healthy bacteria, and more fibre the better. So these small little things, smaller plates and smaller bowls, that's used quite a lot in sort of cafeterias, schools. So you haven't got these huge, you feel like you're having more food if you've got a smaller plate. Like I said before about the images of fruits and vegetables were seen to increase people's intake of the veggies. Adding, lots of people have issues with hiding vegetables, but there's nothing wrong with it because it actually helps the palate get used to different tastes. And the science that sort of says that we're more likely to accept foods if we've tasted them an average of 10 times. It's actually about 7 times when it's within a tomato-based sauce. So there's nothing wrong with, my daughter used to dip spinach leaves in them in tomato puree, but it can be like, even if they've got a bit of ketchup and they're adding, if it's getting them to eat these veggies and getting them to widen the palate, why not, really?
And we mentioned before that language is so important, especially for younger children and young people.
Yeah, so this is from a friend of mine that I've sort of stolen her information here, but she was quite happy for me to do it. So yeah, early years, thinking about language of sort of not forcing and not telling them how to think. It's very much linked to anybody who works with children, young people anyway, and sort of this thing that we're sort of telling them what to think. Well, you ate it before, whereas if we sort of get them used to thinking, trying things, like I've always said, my kids are sort of, we're in a habit young of saying, I don't like it yet, because I would add yet at the end. So it's like really changing that mindset from I don't like it being fixed. Because if Johnny didn't like his peas at 2 or 3, when it's quite a normal time to start refusing food, it's like neophobic tendencies. But again, we're going to cover that in a session. But if you're sort of thinking, oh well, you just tell everybody, oh, Johnny doesn't like peas, and then Johnny still hasn't tried his peas at 40-year-old, because it's like a fixed mindset. So it's sort of being around this, we'll try it, and thinking about sort of saying, protein foods make us strong. I really enjoyed that meal. So not saying well done for clearing your plate, it's sort of going from this language that sort of we've been brought up with from that post-war hangover, you have to finish your plate, sort of from being a bit more relaxed around food, and not tying pudding in as a reward. Not sort of, because all that does is it makes, I think I mentioned this before, where it makes sort of cake being pleasure and vegetables meaning pain. So thinking about how we talk about those things and how we build the importance of things that are more of a treat.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Kelly. So we've got a few links that might be useful for colleagues who are watching this training video.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier on the cooking together. That's a really good one because, like I say, you've got the little videos, you've got the recipes that get sent out to families, you sign up for it. They've got loads and loads of health swaps, healthy snack swaps, healthy pack lunch recipes, how to set your pack lunches out, what to include in it. And we're doing a Darlington project on that as well, so we can share that soon as well. British Nutrition Foundation got some great things in there, especially when I was saying about the portions. There can be printouts that you can put around your setting. And the foodeffectivelife.org, a lot of food teachers use that resource. It's around school resources, but anybody can access it, and they've got lots of recipes. And especially I suppose if you've got a teenager who's interested in cooking and wants to try some different recipes out, they can use that as well.
That's great, and we've come to the end of today's presentation. So hope everyone who's watching has enjoyed it, and you can find this video on Workforce Development Intranet as usual, and on Living Well Darlington. Thanks for joining us, Kelly.
Thank you for joining us. That was good. Thank you.
Cheers all.